are so excited to have Kat Diersen with us today. If you were here last time, we got to see Anthony Swan, and he was amazing and talked to us about kind of like in classroom learning. But we also really wanted to get some folks who had experience out in the field. So we're super excited that we have Kat Diersen. I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. So she is responsible for advancing defenders of wildlife conservation objectives throughout the Southeast, with an emphasis on the Southern Appalachian region. She promotes imperiled species conservation by engaging state and federal agency officials, public and private landowners and managers, and citizen stakeholders in integrated wildlife and landscape scale conservation efforts. Kat works with stakeholders to protect, improve, and expand habitats for vulnerable native wildlife through public policy development that leads to better land and water management. So Kat, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to you and just take it away.
All right. Oh, nice, like that. Oh, and salamanders and chickens, you guys, what wonderful resting background pictures you all have. All right, well, the first thing I want to say is thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's just an absolute honor and a pleasure, and I'm just really so charmed that that you folks took an interest in my work, and I'm excited to talk about it a little bit. I want to start by saying that I really thought long and hard about how to sort of connect the realm of what I do to the realm of environmental education. Defenders of Wildlife is a very nimble organization that approaches conservation challenges from a lot of directions. But one thing we don't do that I really wish we did do was, strategically engage the next generation to create conservation conscious folks who will be the leaders that come behind us. So thank you all for all that you do, because you're filling a much needed niche. Where I finally settled on how I can sort of make the link between these two things is to start by sharing my own sort of personal background with you, and hoping that you won't find it too boring of a story. But I'll go ahead and start by saying that, first of all, I'm a Virginia native. I was born in Richmond, but I moved as a child and grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, but Virginia is home. I'm currently based in Defender's Southeast Regional Field Office in Asheville, North Carolina. Growing up, my family was very much embodied sort of the classic ideal of successful middle-class suburbia. My parents did not hunt. My parents did not fish. My parents did not birdwatch. We did not camp. I never went to a summer camp. I think it's probably safe to say that my parents' only exposure to the natural world occurred when I would drag in things that I dug up from the stream behind our house and insist on letting them live in little glass aquaria all over our back porch. Mom would not let them be inside. So it was not an upbringing that was necessarily conducive to having an intimate relationship with nature, but it was always there. It was in me from the start, and I really just needed an outlet to explore it, and guidance to understand how I could engage with wildlife in the natural world. And I don't think it will come as a surprise to you folks that that happened for me in the form of a teacher. My high school environmental science teacher, his name is Mr. Savory, at Bearden High School in Knoxville, Tennessee, is 100% responsible for opening the doors to exploration for me that led me to where I am today. He taught environmental science as core curriculum, but he also taught the study of wildlife behavior and ecology as electives. He was also the president of the nascent Bearden High School Outdoors Club. He used to give us, and this is not a joke, he used to give us extra credit if we would bring him roadkill before class, because he taught us taxidermy as an after-school activity. So this is a man who loved nature in all its forms, was not squeamish about it, and taught us to be creative and exploratory, and really opened the world for all of his students. He was much beloved, and certainly he did that for me. So I very much have an educator to thank for having explored this path and come to where I am. So after I left high school, I went off to college and majored in English, because even though Mr. Savory had, instilled in me and others this, tremendous love for the natural world, I was not very good at science or math. I am still not very good at science or math. And so I still had the impression that the environmental world was not for me. Biology, ecology, zoology. I'm sorry? Did someone say something? Oh, okay, sorry. I very much thought that those fields were not for me. I was, more of a creative type, more of a communicator. And I think I was sort of fumbling around with the notion that, well, maybe I would get into, journalism, and I would cover science and environmental topics, and that would be the way that I could continue to engage. So that's what I went off to college to do. I still felt that, I needed to pursue a career that played to my strengths. But the natural world just wasn't going to let go of me. And so as I muscled my way through an English degree with a journalism minor, I was always, running off, joining the outdoors club, doing volunteer river cleanups. Just my heart was with anything that had me outdoors, anything that had me, working in nature. And as my college years wound up and I found myself not being scooped up by every newspaper and magazine on the planet, I don't know why National Geographic didn't come knocking at my door. And, was seriously starting to contemplate the option of like crawling up into the mountains and into a cave and just becoming a hermit. A friend of mine introduced me to an organization called the Student Conservation Association, SCA. And this is an organization that places recent graduates in internships across the country in all different sort of sectors of the environmental world. And it was absolutely my saving grace. It allowed me to get my first ever job out of college, being a field technician in Western Massachusetts, controlling endangered invasive species and surveying for the endangered bog turtle. So after a kind of series of field tech jobs and internships through SCA, despite having absolutely no science background whatsoever, I had sort of managed to worm my way into the environmental field. And having done so, was able to get an absolutely bottom rung of the ladder job at the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, which is the state government agency that regulates game and non-game wildlife in the state of Florida. All states have them, as I'm sure you know. And I started at the bottom, and it was difficult to work my way up, not having one of the conventional degrees for folks that are usually hired into those positions. But what I learned along the way is that I brought to that organization a really valuable skill set that was not abundant in the division that I worked in. And as science educators and as science communicators, sure, you can appreciate that not all scientists are necessarily the best communicators. And so being someone who could work in that middle space between and resource managers and the public wound up being a really, really valuable tool for me. It allowed me to kind of, deliver my agency's messages to a public in a manner that engaged them and garnered support, and also, I guess, influence managers and scientists to sort of, remember that, not all wildlife conservation is biology and ecology. There's a human dimensions component to that is, essential to successful wildlife conservation outcomes, because you just can't conserve species if the community doesn't want it. So those were really valuable years for me. But as I mentioned, not having the appropriate degree was a little bit of a glass ceiling, a little bit of a limiting factor for me at a certain point in my career. But I will say that having worked in a state wildlife agency for several years, what I discovered, and something that just had never occurred to me when I was first going off to college, is that there are a lot of ways to practice conservation, and science is not the only one. There are managers, there are communicators, there are lawyers, heavens to Betsy, are there lawyers? And a particular interest that I developed while I was there was in environmental policy. And I'll come back around and talk about policy a little bit more later. But when I was graduating from my undergrad, back when dirt was young, there was no such thing as a degree in environmental policy. Now, people were practicing it. It had been practiced ever since there was any kind of conservation effort in this country, but no one was teaching it. And so several years on into my career, these are degree programs that started showing up, and I took an interest and went back to school a little bit later in my career than some folks do, because I had learned by then that I had something valuable to offer that didn't necessarily have to do with research. And didn't necessarily have to do with monitoring and all of those other necessary core components that you need for conservation, but by no means the only one. So I got to pursue an education in environmental policy at the American University in Washington, D.C. And I came out the other side of it with a novel skill set that has served me extraordinarily well in my efforts to conserve endangered and imperiled species all across Southern Appalachia. So that is how I wound up here at Defenders of Wildlife. And I suppose next I will start to kind of talk to you a little bit about what it is we do down here and what it is we're working on saving and how it is we go about saving it. But I did want to preface all of that by saying I never would have known that I could, embrace conservation and do it as a job and have it be, the focus of my career and my passion if it hadn't been for early educators and mentors along the way. So that has filled the hole left in the child of me that always wanted to go to summer camp and never got to. I hope that you guys can all take a little bit of action from, hearing yet another one of those affirming stories that it's all down to an educator that we wound up in the careers that we love. And with that, what I would like to do, Bruce majored in theater. Yep, it's definitely, there's many a path. So what I would like to do now is share a PowerPoint slide with you guys, and I am inevitably going to get it wrong how I do this. So if you'll bear with me for 1 second, I will go to, I've got the PowerPoint open in my window, but I'm trying to figure out how to actually start it as a PowerPoint. Did I mention that technology is not my strong suit? So let's see here. I'm so sorry, guys. Give me just a minute. Reading view? No, that's not it. Presentation, that must be it. There we go. So can some clever person tell me if the right thing to do is to share my screen?
Yes,
or
so if you
just
hit that share screen button at the bottom, and that should
Mhm.
open up your windows that you may have open on your screen, and you'll select that.
It does say, I got a little box that says host disabled participant screen sharing.
All right, we can fix that. We have the technology.
Thank goodness somebody does.
You should be good to go now.
Okay, let me give it a shot. Oh, it will let me just share the PowerPoint slide, I think. Let me see if this will work.
We can see that nice and clear. So you are great.
What I need is this one so that I can see my notes. Oh, nope, that wasn't it. Guys, I'm so sorry. I'm a technological nightmare over here.
If it makes you feel better, I've just been like a mental nightmare just due to my week. So
oh boy,
grace is our word. Grace is our word. You're good.
I like that. I like that. Okay. All right. Can everybody see my starter screen at least? That will get me partway to what I
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Oh, look at that. I'm being recorded. Gosh almighty. Screen. Well, now I can't move.
You may need to click over in the left. If you go over to your,
This is so embarrassing. I'm so sorry. There's a PowerPoint. But I seem to have it on both screens. How do I end this?
Down in show.
End show.
Yes.
Okay, there we are. I'm going to try this one more time with my deepest apologies. And if not, screen sharing has stopped. Okay, if not, I'm just going to wing it. I'm going to screen share one more time.
I can edit all of this out before we post it, so don't worry.
Won't that be lovely? All right. Do you see my screen?
Not yet.
Is there another button other than the share screen button?
There is not.
Okay, let's try.
There we go. Now it's back.
Hey! Oh, for the love. Wow. Okay. Finally. Guys, my deepest apologies. Let me move this because you can all already see yourself. All right, here we go. So for the next part of my talk, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my organization and how we approach what we do. And I'll try to take it down specifically to some of the wonderful critters of Appalachia and the specific projects that we're undertaking here, including in Virginia.
So Kat, we cannot actually, it says it's shared screen is sharing, but we cannot actually see the slideshow yet.
Resume share.
There we go. That's it.
Okay, Lordy, lordy. Did it go forward?
Yes, so we are good.
Huzzah! All right. So my organization, Defenders of Wildlife, was formed in, let me see, 1947. So we are one of the sort of oldest, kind of most venerable environmental nonprofits that's out there. We've been a leading force in the wildlife conservation movement for many, many years. We opened our Southeast office in 2015. So we're based in DC, but we have a number of field offices scattered around the country where we, do more of our on-the-ground work within the community. So our Southeast office is actually the newest one. Many of our others have existed for a long time. And one of the reasons that it was important to us to open an office in the Southeast is the fact that the Southeast is, as you all probably know, a global biodiversity hotspot. So, Defenders, our logo is the wolf, and our iconic species are sea turtles and grizzly bears and those wonderful things. But Defenders cares about all biodiversity, not just megafauna, and especially in the Southeast. That means imperiled freshwater species are a major focus of our efforts because a huge amount of the biodiversity of the Southeast lives in our rivers and streams. Okay. Can you see my next slide?
Yep, we're good.
I'm gonna hope that's okay, great. All right, it's working. So one of the things that I really like about Defenders of Wildlife and working here is that we really do a little bit of everything. Not all environmental organizations and academic institutions and businesses and things like that focus as broadly as we do. They tend to kind of take one or two tools in the toolkit and focus deeply on utilizing those conservation tools. But we do a little bit of everything. And I actually, conveniently, that makes it kind of a neat illustration of what I was talking about earlier, how, environmental education can take people across a wide spectrum of interests or skills. So one of our departments is legislative affairs and government relations. And what that means is we have staff who work with mostly federal, but also state legislatures on developing legislation, modifying legislation, lobbying for changes to legislation, and, other things that Congress has purview over to, advance law and policy that is beneficial to biodiversity. We have a legal department that exists to ensure that the private sector and federal government agencies are keeping their commitments to wildlife and making sure to, hold them accountable when they don't. We do a lot of grassroots activism work. A lot of that is based in our field offices, although we've pulled together a whole dang lot of people for the March for Science a few years back up in DC. And really what this means is galvanizing community members from all different walks of life around local issues that directly impact them, and creating mechanisms for them to make their voices be heard at the local level, and to the folks who have control over environmental decisions that impact them. We have an absolutely wonderful think tank called the Center for Conservation Innovation. And the folks in there do good old-fashioned science, biology and ecology, and get out there in the field and build the data that we need to make science-based decisions within Defenders. They also do just an incredible amount with technology and big data. We have just amazing GIS modelers. We have done really cool projects where we've used satellite data and compiled that with huge databases to geospatially track, the impacts of, say, for example, mountaintop removal mining on very specific watersheds and the species within those watersheds across Appalachia, or even to to use drones to identify places where poaching is occurring, or to just, write incredible amounts of code that can scrape the internet to find, any and every mention of, new activities going on in an area with species that we care about, to just absolutely you name it. We spend a lot of time developing technology tools that we basically offer for free to the environmental community and folks in government, to help them do their jobs better and more efficiently using the best available data. So that's a really important corner of our organization, and I love doing work with them. And then finally, there's we do a lot of environmental policy, which I'll talk about here in a moment. But the link I wanted to make with this is just, going back to what I said earlier, I, as a young person, felt like maybe conservation was not for me because I'm not good at math, I'm not good at science. I couldn't see myself being a scientist. But that's okay. I wound up being a policy specialist, and I'm contributing what I have to the field of conservation with the skills that I have. And, so if you have young people who have been, have known how to code websites since middle school, if you have young folks who are really civically aware and, I don't know, joined the Sunrise Movement and, want to be politically engaged, any of those types of people, can be brought into the sphere of environmental conservation if the connection can be made between, why nature matters and what we can do about it. So just a little little plug for Defenders there. So I want to take a minute to specifically talk about what I mostly do, which is policy, because I feel like the idea of policy, and particularly environmental policy, is a little bit nebulous for a lot of people. And it was certainly nebulous to me until I went and got a degree in it. So no shame. Here's a few just definitions that I scraped off the internet that I won't read to you because I'm sure you can read them yourselves. But my favorite and most ambivalent one of the three is prudence or wisdom in the management of affairs. And the reason that I wanted to focus in on that one is because environmental policy, any policy, but of course environmental policy, can exist and yet be neither prudent or wise. There's plenty of that. And we spend a lot of time trying to push back on that and replace environmental, poor environmental policies with good ones. Policy is not law, and it is not legislation. It's not the making of legislation. It's not the passage of laws. It's not the defense of laws. It is the interpretation of how laws really play out in the real world. It is the decisions about how laws and statutes and directives are implemented. And it is the space in which decisions are made about how that implementation is going to look. So if you're looking at the federal government, Congress passes laws, the courts evaluate laws, but it is largely up to government bureaucracies to execute laws. And they get to decide how those laws will be executed, and they have tremendous discretion in how they do so. So that's the world of policy. It's the world of deciding what do the rules mean and how are we going to implement them. And that is the sphere in which I have spent the last several years operating. I see a blinking thing that says more. There's things coming up in the chat.
You're good. We are watching the chat and the questions, so you just do.
Okay, great.
And we will get to those
well,
later.
Well, and I should have mentioned, feel free to interrupt me with questions or comments at any time. I'm not, wedded to slogging through this. I can take them as we go if folks want to do that. Oh, that's out of order. Oh, well, okay. Well, we'll talk about this slide next. All right. Well, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about our home, Southern Appalachia. My little screen sharing thing is occluding the title of this slide here, but this is a slide from a recent study in 2016 that came out that basically robustly maps the occurrence of the order Caudata, which includes salamanders and newts, all across the globe, and shows where there are the most of them. And I think you can see for yourself the implications on this map of why we live in an incredibly, incredibly important area for amphibian conservation. And just as a personal aside, as someone who's always loved an underdog and a very big fan of slime and scales, as my mother will attest to the tanks on the porch, I am thrilled and elated to be working here every day. When I'm not working, I'm in a river snorkeling and looking at fish or flipping over logs and looking for salamanders. These are the critters that I love. And I love that I am here in the global hotspot for those critters, doing work for them.
We
So,
actually,
all right. Oh, go ahead.
We actually have a question that ties really well with salamanders.
Let's do it.
And that was, are there any kind of expectations or maps of the, and I'm going to mispronounce this, of the potential of the chytrid fungi to arrive in the Southeast or Blue Ridge region? Nancy asked this question. She said, I've read about it and that it has the potential to wipe out our unique salamander population and all amphibians quickly.
Well, I have a whole other hour-long presentation on chytrid fungus and the amphibian crisis. So get with me and I'll be happy to share that one with you as well. The short answer is, due to aggressive, proactive measures in both the science and policy realm on a truly unprecedented scale in the United States, we firmly believe that we do not yet have Chytridiatomosis salamandrivorans in the southeastern United States, or indeed anywhere in the United States yet. A blanket ban was passed in, I want to say 2015, by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the import of a large number of species, salamander species for the pet trade, particularly those most known to carry chytrid. And a really astronomical survey program that is led by the USGS and supported by state and federal agencies is actively monitoring numerous key sites all across the country on a regular basis and getting out there and swabbing salamanders and having them evaluated on an annual basis to find any evidence of chytrid. And over 100,000 salamanders in the last 7 or 8 years have been swabbed, and we have yet to find evidence of that particular chytrid fungus. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And absolutely, our species are at great risk. We are also the global center for the genus Desmognathus salamanders, and all desmogs seem to be particularly susceptible to chytrid. So if it gets to our region, it's going to do damage, and it's going to do it very fast. And I wish I had a more rosy prediction for you, but I take comfort knowing that despite the fact that it's very, very unsung and nobody ever hears about it, the effort to monitor and take advance action to stave off and protect against the encroachment of chytrid is really the unsung hero of the conservation movement as far as the government is concerned. I mean, it's this massive collaboration, many, many dollars, very much off of everybody's radar. But when it comes, we will have protocols in place for how we deal with it by species and by region. And meanwhile, research proceeds at a pace almost on par with research into the COVID vaccine, into what we can develop that can slow the spread of chytrid, either by introducing it into native populations or by actually inoculating important waterways with it. So there's research happening. Fingers crossed. That was a very long answer. I apologize, and I could go on about it for days because it's such an important topic. But that's the short answer, and I'm happy to follow up individually if you want to talk more about it. All righty. Well, now we're going to proceed to, I hope, a fun slide. I don't know anybody's backgrounds on this call, so I don't know if this will be fun for you or not. But these are a few of the species that are found in Virginia, in various places of Virginia, mostly the western part of the state. And I thought it would be fun to see if anybody knew what any of them are. And I will tell you later if you want, but it will be fun to see if folks can guess. So I'm going to pop up my chat thing here very quickly and see if anyone has any ideas. A mole salamander. Who are you thinking? Oh, you know what? I should have given, I should have put numbers on these or something. For the mole salamander, are you thinking it's the one in the middle on the right? The lower left is spotted. Yep, that's right. The lower right is redback. That's right. Yes, on the orange leaf. Ah, I thought so. That is a really good guess, but it is actually a streamside salamander, which is very, very closely related to the mole salamander. But when you pick them up and hold them close, they're kind of blue and glittery. And mole salamanders are a little bit less outstanding in their coloration, but they certainly have the same body shape and they certainly have those big characteristic ribs down the side. Very close though. Yes, marbled in the middle. You guys know your salamanders. This is awesome. Is the center top a Shenandoah? No. Is the one underneath a dusky? Bottom right is a dusky, and oh no, bottom right is red-backed. I'm not sure which one. The northern one is a red. Yeah. I'm losing track. You guys are good. This is going better than I thought. Top center is not a Shenandoah. It's a red. Let's see. Top middle. No, you guys are all doing great. I'll go through them real quick. Those were wonderful, though. Those are some great guesses. So bottom left, you got right. That was a spotted. Bottom right, you got right. That was a red back. So we'll go across the top, and middle is a marbled. So top left is one of my absolute favorite salamanders. These are green salamanders. They're the only arboreal species in the eastern United States, meaning they spend part of their lives up in trees, which is pretty uncommon for a salamander. And then red salamander in the center. This one on the right is one of my favorite salamanders. It's the long-tail salamander, and I just love them because they are so long and skinny, and they look like those little Chinese dragons that they bring out at New Year. The center left here is a Yonelasi salamander, which is very, very common up in the higher elevations, but hard to find unless it's in the middle of the night. And then over here we had our streamside salamander. And then this one, somebody guessed hellbender. Very close. They are commonly mistaken, but this is our only other fully aquatic salamander, and it's a water dog, which actually some folks commonly call a hellbender, or some folks call hellbenders water dogs, which they're not. This is a water dog. That was great, guys. Thank you so much. Wow, what a wonderful job. Okay, let's see. Get out of this chat here and move along. Thank you. See, I'm trying my hand at doing a little environmental educating myself, which is not my wheelhouse. So that was wonderful. Moving on to fish. Telling the same story here as we were telling with salamanders. We are absolutely a global biodiversity hotspot for fish as well. I'm going to draw your attention to this area right here, this river, and then these two, which actually flow into it. This is the Duck River Basin here in Middle Tennessee. And within the Duck River is the most biodiverse river in North America. There are more species in the duck than there are in all the waterways of Europe combined. So we have just an incredible richness and diversity of fish species here. They're wonderful, they're enigmatic, they're beautiful, and so few people know about them unless they're trout. But again, you know, just it's incredibly exciting to know that, you know, and this one right here, by the way, has several endangered species. Roanoke log perch is one I work on here in Virginia. I should have thought to zoom in on Virginia. Shame on me. I'm not going to do a guessing game on these. Just thought I would show you some pictures of what we have. And you guys have all of these except, nope, you've got them all. These are all species that can be found in Virginia too. These are mostly out of the genera of shiners, darters, dace, and chubs. Most of them are pretty small, except this one up here, of course, which is our beautiful native rainbow trout. Sorry, that's a brook trout. Most of these species are tiny. They do not have this glorious coloration all year round. These guys are in their quote unquote breeding plumage, which happens for some species it starts in early spring. Oops, most species it's late spring. This here is your Roanoke log perch. This is one of your most endangered species fish species that you guys have in Virginia. So I just absolutely love river snorkeling and going to see these fish when they're in their breeding colors. And I do a lot of work in the waterways where the most imperiled ones are found because they're such a precious resource. Speaking of that, I'll just go ahead and toss in another sort of environmental education plug. If any of you ever work in Southern Appalachia in the George Washington or Jefferson National Forest, down here in North Carolina in the Pisgah or Nantahala National Forests, the Forest Service and several nonprofit groups have what they call a Kids in the Creek program. And they will zip those kids up in wetsuits and give them snorkels in late spring and go underwater with them and show them the glories of Southern Appalachia. And I can think of no more effective tool for inspiring love and fascination for the aquatic critters that we have here than doing that. It's just a wildly successful program. So if any of you environmental educators out there are interested in that, by all means follow up with me and I'll be happy to connect you because it's just wonderful. And yes, grown-ups can do it too. All right. So now we'll get into yet one more heat map, but this one I wanted to show you because it does say something specific about Virginia. This is the number of endangered animals by state in the US. And as you can see, Virginia, I mean the Southeast broadly, but Virginia in particular ranks really, really high. You guys have a lot of imperiled species. There are good sides to that in that our precious and rare federal dollars do tend to make their way into Virginia to help support conservation efforts. But there are downsides to that too, in that there can be a lot of pushback by the sort of private landowner / property rights kind of rural activist movement that creates a lot of really unnecessary acrimony between folks who are trying to conserve species and folks who want to preserve their private property rights. We can talk a little bit more about that. Take a look at Great Smoky Mountains Institute at Tremont. Oh, they're wonderful. Yep. All wonderful organizations. All right. Here are a few more of your Virginia species that are not fish, well, except that one, that's the Chucky Madtom, that I just wanted to point out. Top left is my absolute favorite in the whole wide world other than hellbenders. And this is the bog turtle. It's North America's smallest turtle. It's extremely imperiled. We do work with farmers in southwestern Virginia, which is where this species is found, one of the places this species is found, to restore and protect the wetlands that they live in. I mean, to tell you guys, as professionals, we're not supposed to anthropomorphize our critters, but like that is the cutest thing living. So I love working on them. Again, just, fun picture slide of some of the many imperiled plants and animals. This is a satyr. This is one of the most endangered butterflies in the United States, and it's thriving on your military installations and nowhere else. So that's kind of interesting. But Virginia is a hotbed and needs our support, and I certainly am grateful that I'm able to work there. Okay, here is my last attempt at being an environmental educator. Oh my gosh, is it 6:22? I better hurry up. Yes, it is the most adorable critter ever. I'm gonna just play parts of 2 of these videos because I think mussel sex is absolutely fascinating and every environmental educator needs to know about it. But I also think there's a wrong way and a right way to educate folks about the importance of mussels to the overall aquatic systems in the Southeast United States, and how just alien and wild and bizarre and wonderful they are. So first I'm going to show you, okay, YouTube, let's do it. A little bit of how not to educate.
We are not able to hear it at the moment, so.
Oh no, you're not?
All right, so we can fix that. So if you, I hate to tell you to stop sharing your screen, but if you stop sharing your screen and reshare it, there will be a button in the left-hand corner that says share audio when you stop sharing.
Okay, I have stopped sharing.
And if you go to share again,
there
should be down in that, maybe in the left, there should be a little checkbox that says something about share
sound. Oh, wonderful. Okay, you're a guru. Thank you for your help. And now it's sharing the wrong screen, isn't it? Let me try one more time. Share screen.
Make sure that button's checked again, because sometimes it won't turn it off.
Okay, share sound. Fingers crossed. You see my screen?
Yes.
With an extraordinary life cycle. To reach adulthood, its young must spend part of their lives inside a fish, the largemouth bass. To get there, the mussels must make physical contact, a difficult task, as mussels don't swim. But the bass has a weakness. It's a voracious predator of small fish, particularly darters. Even the slightest wriggle of a darter's tail will attract bass. Believe it or not, the fish on the mussel is an imitation, a perfect replica that will lure bass within striking range. The mussel can somehow sense approaching fish and wriggles its lure faster to entice them. If it gets the twitching just right, the remarkable likeness should do the rest. On impact, the mussel squirts its young into the bass's mouth.
Okay, that was the first one. Can folks still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I know that is super fascinating and interesting and wonderful to people like you. So I hope you're as excited about that as I am. Just to ponder the notion that mussels don't have eyes. So how could they possibly know how to imitate the prey of the fish that they need? It's just mind-boggling. Mussels are so amazing. That said, if I was doing outreach to a classroom full of high schoolers, I think I would want to play them this one. Okay, all done. Not all done. Just had to share those. If you were a student or an environmental educator, which of those two videos do you think you would prefer to share with your audiences, just out of curiosity? And I've lost the chat box, but I bet I know the answer.
So someone said it depends on if I think they can handle it or not, because that may.
Well, clearly that's for a high school audience
Yeah.
at best. There's the chat box. Depends on if they can handle it. Very cool. I think they would like both. Well, I guess that just goes to show you how little I know, because I know which one appeals to me, and I know, and which one got my attention more easily, despite not having a voiceover to it. But I think there are, you guys are pointing out that there are things about the first one that would be valuable to kids as well. So anyway, that was a total aside, but mussels are wonderful. They're very endangered. Mussel sex is fascinating, and I just wanted to share that with you guys. There we go. Okay. It is 6:30, and I have many slides to go. So I want to ask our organizers if they would like me to share a few more summary slides and wrap up, which I can certainly do, or if folks want to stick around.
I mean, I think we can poll our audience to say, like, are you committed? Are you in it? Do you want to keep going? 1 for yes into the chat, 2 for no, and we'll just do it democratically. How are y'all feeling? Do y'all not like that pressure?
No pressure.
I'm into it. I have a feeling that, knowing our group, they're probably all into it and hook, line, and sinker, to use more fishing terms.
Keep it going then.
All right. Okay, well, I'll try to not ramble as much on some of these other ones. Oh, let's see. Okay, so scrolling back around to talking about environmental policy. So I was talking earlier about, the fact that policy in a lot of ways is where the rubber meets the road. And in environmental policy, there's a lot of different ways to think about policy, and certainly people kind of adopt whatever framework they want to adopt to, help them get the job done. So one way you can think about environmental policy tools is through a legal framework. Obviously, there are innumerable important environmental acts and other acts with environmental implications that exist in law. And so one of the ways to utilize policy tools to advance conservation priorities is to intimately understand the law and know how it behaves in the world and how it should behave in the world, and to kind of push the needle in the direction that you want it to go. Okay, I'm so sorry, you guys. My dog knows when 6:30 is better than any digital clock on earth. So the three environmental laws that I am intimately familiar with and have tried to know well so that I know what to do with them are the Endangered Species Act, the Farm Bill, and the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, or SMCRA. They're fairly explanatory, self-explanatory. The ESA exists to protect the interests of threatened and endangered species in the U.S. from the sometimes adversarial interests of human communities. The Farm Bill is a very, very wide-ranging act that covers everything from forest management to food stamps. I specialize in the corner of the Farm Bill called Title II that is dedicated to supporting farmers in conducting conservation activities on their lands. And SMACRA is pretty much what it says it is. It is the playbook by which the government tells the mining industry what they must do and what they can do in terms of their commercial activities. And it is unfortunately very, very weakly enforced. You can take a sectoral framework to policy work. So all that really means is just kind of picking an area that you care about and knowing a lot about that area and how different things impact it. So these are 3 areas that I work in. I tend to focus on private lands, which I'll talk a little bit about why in a minute, a whole lot. But then I also focus on regulatory policy. And this really does just mean knowing when these laws are not being fulfilled or complied with, and knowing what the best mechanisms are to enforce them. Sorry, I keep clicking forward. And then incentive-based, and what that basically means is the opposite of regulatory. It's non-regulatory. So it is these spaces within the law that that allow individuals or sectors or industries or agencies to be forward thinking in their approach to the intersection of their business and wildlife. And then finally, there's people like to think about a strategic framework, which is kind of the how of policy. So this one goes on forever and ever and ever, but there are 3 that I tend to focus on: coalition building. And what that really means is basically finding stakeholders with the same vested interest in a policy outcome, and getting them to organize around that policy outcome and bring their resources to the table to achieve it. Grassroots advocacy is pretty self-explanatory. It is a pragmatic decision about how to achieve your objectives under other sections. And then science communication is science communication, but it is also a strategic approach to achieving policy objectives, because you cannot, you cannot get governing entities to implement laws in the manner most appropriate for, in our case, wildlife, if they don't understand the implications of those laws on wildlife. So you can specialize in science communication as a way to influence policy. So these are some of the areas I work in. The lists go on forever. I'm going to try and talk very quickly somehow about one particular program that I spearhead that focuses on the Farm Bill, private lands, and coalition building. That's a slight typo there. But anyway, I'm going to talk about an example of my work in these 3 frameworks, because I think they're kind of the most relevant to conservation in the Southeast in particular. So why private lands? I like to work, and I try to focus my work in the private land sector for one very obvious reason. We have a lot of it. In the West, if you want to do conservation, you had better understand how to, partner and or interact with the federal government, because they own so much of the land out there. But in the Eastern United States, not only is most of the land privately held, it is privately held in very, very small patchworks. It's not the 100,000 acre mega farms of Nebraska. So you have to find a way to engage with private landowners in the Southeast, because that is where most species are. Why the Farm Bill? Well, the Farm Bill is an incredibly underutilized tool when it comes to wildlife conservation, and particularly when it comes to conservation of aquatic species. Title II of the bill is an act that administers $68 billion worth of funding every 5 years, that's billion with a B, to farmers across the country to help offset their costs of implementing sustainable agriculture practices. And whether that means sustainable for air quality, for carbon sequestration, for soil quality, for water quality, it can be a bunch of different sustainability targets. And wildlife is one of the identified sustainability targets under the Farm Bill, but it is the one that NRCS themselves actually know the least about and have the least sort of technical knowledge on how to be effective there. So there are enormous opportunities for partnering. And also it's billions of dollars. You can't get that out of any other, there is no grant or funding source on earth that makes as much money available to wildlife potentially as the Farm Bill. And then of course also the Farm Bill gets us onto private lands. In the Southeast, approximately 75% of the land base is devoted to farming, ranching, or forestry. So an extraordinary amount of our land base in the Southeast is in agriculture. And therefore you have to work with agriculture if you want to get conservation done. And of course, working in ag makes a lot of sense when you consider that some of the most important threats to imperiled species, particularly aquatic ones, in the US derive from agriculture. And this is a very short and non-inclusive list of some of the things that we confront when we're trying to protect aquatic species habitat. I already talked about that, so I'm going to skip that slide. And then finally, why coalition building? I feel like some of this stuff will be very native and intuitive to you guys, but you know, approaching conservation challenges from a base of a coalition does a lot of things. It fosters community and political support as opposed to, you know, taking a more adversarial tack or a more regulatory tack where you can, you know, find yourself at the opposite side of the table or the courtroom from people that you might need to have relationships with down the road. Building coalitions brings together novel stakeholders. So I've built and been a member of several coalitions that involve regulatory agencies, academic institutions, local community groups, local business groups, that get people talking together that would in no other circumstance talk around something where they all have a vested interest in the outcome. Coalitions focus on win-win outcomes. So particularly in the case of like agricultural conservation, which is where I work a lot, you might think, well, agricultural interests are adversarial to conservation interests because farmers need to use pesticides and herbicides, and they need to plant crops in their soil and water cows in their streams and whatever else. And so how could these two things be compatible? But they can be. And oftentimes the way you discover those areas of compatibility is by having those folks at the table together. We really work hard to arrive at consensus-built outcomes when you're working within a coalition. And I find it's just a much more pleasant way to do business. And then of course, coalition building creates, you know, community and a sense of ownership. There have been plenty of farmers that I've worked with over the years that when I first met them, they thought hellbenders were, you know, evil, literally, because hellbender and toxic. They believed that if you found a hellbender in the stream, it was a bad thing because they were somehow poisoning the stream. And by the time I've stopped working with them, they have literally named all the hellbenders in their streams and they love them and are proud of them. So those are kind of my favorite areas to work in because I feel like they produce the most sustainable, well-supported long-term conservation outcomes from communities, and they don't have to be adversarial. So what I was going to do before it was 6:42 was give you sort of a case study of that coalition building work, which is the Southeastern Hellbender Conservation Initiative, which is an initiative that I spearhead. It is in operation across 3 southeastern states, and we are rapidly planning to expand into 2 more. And one of the southeastern states that we work in is Southwestern Virginia, which is why I wanted to talk about it. I think in the interest of time, what I will do is just briefly, you know, tell you guys that the Hellbender Coalition, the Hellbender Initiative is sort of a function of all 3 of those policy areas coming together, bringing in lots of stakeholders, utilizing existing law and legislation to direct policy opportunities, I would say those policy programs towards opportunities to benefit aquatic species. And I had I mean, just a ridiculous number of slides to show you with great pictures of hellbenders. But I suppose I will have to forgo those. And I'm really, really happy and to talk to anybody a little bit more about the Southeastern Hellbender Conservation Initiative, or we call it SESI. If anyone's interested in learning more, we do engage volunteers in tree planting activities, riparian forest buffer planting activities on farms from time to time. This top right corner is an example of where we worked with a local environmental nonprofits volunteers to plant trees to strengthen this buffer here in a hellbender stream. And we work with a lot of academic institutions to, monitor the health of the populations in watersheds where we work. And these are our priority watersheds here in Southwestern Virginia. They're obviously parts of the Clinch and Holston rivers there. And I cannot think, these are some of the biologists. This is Melanie Carter. She's our biologist that works in Virginia. I would love to spend more time talking about SESI, and I'm really happy to do it offline. And I'm just really sorry that I didn't have time to share that last minute case study with you, but I'm more than happy to share information about it, especially for those of you who work in Southwestern Virginia, if you're interested in getting engaged with our Shade Your Stream riparian forest planting activities. So apologies for having written an 1.5 hour long presentation when I only had an hour, but if anybody has any really quick questions for me, I will be happy to take them. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to talk about anything at all. Oh, good. Yeah, that would be wonderful if you could do that.
Yeah, definitely. If you share it with us, then we'll post it. And then I don't want to take anyone's time. I'm curious, do the Defenders of Wildlife work with, it's like a coalition. It has to be in that category, but for like wildlife corridors. So I know that's a lot of private land work. So do you spend a lot of time? Yes. Yeah.
I am on the national, a little bit of feedback there, sorry. I'm on the National Transportation Policy, is that what it's called? Transportation Policy Coalition, but yeah, Corridor Policy Coalition. There's a national group of a lot of different environmental organizations that I'm a part of. We're part of a particularly large corridor operation here in Western North Carolina, trying to do wildlife crossovers across I-40 in the Pigeon River Gorge, which is just a huge, crazy interstate that cuts through a deep, deep mountain gorge and is a major impasse to a lot of charismatic species. And then I did not work on, but I'm well aware of the extraordinary success in the Virginia State Legislature just recently in passing Your Own Corridors bills, which I believe is one of the first in the Eastern United States. So that's really, really, really exciting. And, we do advocate at the national level for corridor legislation that is working its way through Congress as well.
Awesome. So cool.
I have a touch of a question, and you probably don't have an answer for it, but it's something that comes to my mind a lot, is that so much of the funding for environmental education in Virginia is tied to the Chesapeake Bay.
Yes.
And so much of our Southwest Virginia audiences can't find the funding to actually do the programs. So do you have any suggestions for us as an organization that pushes for EE across the state, not just in the Bay, though I love the Bay? Any suggestions?
I love the Bay too, but boy, howdy, we have a lot more imperiled species in the western part of the state than we do in the Bay. Golly, what a great question. I mean, I know the typical sources that I go to, but I don't know that those sources are focused on, have categories that focus on environmental ed. Man, I really wish I had a better answer for you. I'll ask around. I mean, I certainly have colleagues that are more in the communication realm than I am, and see if anybody knows of anything. But unfortunately, it's not something I've had to look for. But I am well aware that resources are very scarce in the western part of the state. Yes, whoever that is, take your snorkel out. There's nothing better in this world than a good river snorkel.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time, Kat. What a way to spend your Saturday, making us feel like warm-hearted.
Well,
Oh my gosh, and like motivated. So thank you so much. I hope we can maybe hear from you again in the future. I think I was just enthralled by all the work that you do. So let's stay friends.
let's absolutely stay friends. I will tell you what, we do have community volunteers. We do, workshops and volunteer opportunities and stuff with folks in our communities, young and old. Our office would be very excited to have more opportunities to engage in environmental education, I think. And we have folks in our office who, community outreach and engagement is really their specialty. And I am more than happy to get together and brainstorm with anybody who wants to look at some opportunities in Southwestern Virginia. And I am more than happy to come back and talk about chytrid, talk about hellbenders, talk about bog turtles, anytime. And I will endeavor not to drag it out quite so long next time.
It was at least pleasurable. All right. Thank you, everybody. Go eat. And if it's your thing, drink and be merry. Thank you all so much. We'll send an email out about CEUs tomorrow. Take care, y'all.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Have a great night. Thank you, Kat.